Well, hello everyone. Here, show you right here to talk about for a job binder busy, and this could be an example right here of like any type of backpack or any type of binder that we had back whenever we were younger. Back whenever we were younger kids, and thinking about necessarily to where that for anything that keeps us busy, and you're like Warren to where if any of our parents if it's going to be a mom or dad that's going to keep us busy as well, for anything that chores around the house or anything like that that needs to be done, especially. But you see right here is I went to put together right here using about 5 or 6 different images right here of like a collage right here. This was like an example right here of a poster right here. But you see right here is that with like an online or a mobile amp, and if anybody says like really what is the difference about information updates, and really that it's like for like a mobile device that you would be able to use that for like say it's about the same thing as like online, but then you'd be able to download the mobile amp, and then with the phone or any type of a device that you're using, that it would just what you call is like a that according to my understanding too is to where there may be about maybe 2 or 3 different ways. Instead of having to key in the website each and every time, you can just click on the mobile amp, and it would take you to launch the amp, and then you would be able to go to that same site compared to having to re-enter the website, the web browser over again. And I know with some of my web design skills too, if anybody were warned to where that if you had any type of web designing skills, especially if you like digital designing, that based on your work and research. And the thing too is to where if anybody were warned to where that why is it that sometimes but people give you that look, such as to where they ask you questions, and then that they want you to answer a particular way, and like they have that look on their face like that they were wanting some answers. Especially one of those would be is to where that one of those answers like that they kind of give you that look like that they are extremely curious about the situation. So you have right here, or it's like some examples right here of stuff that keeps us busy, and like for Cash ID, and like warranted to where that if anybody were warranted to where that you don't keep $100 or something like that in cash inside of a binder right here, but this binder right here will be example right here of this is the original binder that I had since my senior year in high school. So if anybody warranted to where that you carry around maybe a backpack or a binder to keep a lot of your papers organized, and if we're used to flipping a few pages to take notes, or maybe to go from from class to class, and then you're like warranted to where that those types of it's like the types of tests that we had it's like when we had to do whenever we were young, especially whenever I was in kindergarten. And I know that they say that whenever you were to be walking to the classroom, that sometimes that they had those cubbies, and then they would even have the desk with your name on it, especially like this is your work desk right here, this is what you gotta do, and these are the supplies that you need. So that's just a thing about for job binder is to where that something that keeps us busy with. And like with anybody, that if we're going to be looking and working on something, and it seems like time seems to go by just a little bit faster whenever it's like you tend to it's like you doing a number of things, especially. But on the other hand, if anybody warrants to, especially whenever you bond with something, it's like what does it basically mean whenever you bond with something? And according to my definition, it basically means is to where that whenever you bond with something, that you start it's whenever the clients and other people get to know your work just a little bit better, and then to where that they become I guess if you want to call it that they become fully aware about how well that you do on a job, and how well that your work performance is. And I guess if you want to call it like whenever they grow and attach to the job that you do, especially. So that for any kind of job resume or some sort, that you're like warranted or any references, especially about other people that know about your work, especially the ones who are willing to want you to do work for them, especially. But I use a binder, by the way, because I was like thinking about a way to keep a lot of the paperwork organized, especially. And if most of us have used programs like Adobe Acrobat, that you would be able to convert. And I know that that a lot of times with like digital designing or any type of job like that is to where that people ask you to help train them and understand about that they got data on like a flash drive or a memory card, and that they are trying to convert that to open it up with the program and do any type of improvements or editing or some sort like that. So I'm sure most of us here know how to work a flash memory drive, or if it's going to be anything about an online drive. And if they have anything about maybe paper documents that contain source of information that is important, like if I were to be using this binder right here as example whenever I file my taxes especially. So you have right here for Cash ID as well as for Busy, tutoring, as well as training. So you have these different what you call top objectives, and with these objectives, and knowing about if you're going to use them all, but really that I kind of contend to that point to where that for any attention I could get is to where if anybody wanted to where that any job that you do get, that people ask you questions and know about that any answers that you may keep into a binder especially, but any information updated, it's like for what's the difference really, but really that sometimes any moment to where anybody say that a way to keep busy with something is to where that people ask you questions, and have right here's a magnifying glass right here. Go ahead and select the man on Photoshop, and then I would be able to, it's like if anybody were to ask me questions such as about the basics about the job, especially about the important responsibilities and knowing about how people get to know your work and then for what you do and then how you do it. And sometimes they had that look on their eyes, they had that look on their face, such as to where that they are waiting for you to respond. And then sometimes you're like, well, you may already know the answer to that question, or that hey, that if you're waiting for me to respond to this or that. But you see right here is use right here is a hand tool, but this right here would be like if this was right here, this binder right here would be considered an example of a job. So if anybody were to say like your parents or guardians or who that would know your work pretty well, and think back whenever you were young, that for what do you think that Matthew could be doing in his bedroom, huh? Do you think that that he would be what you call listening to the radio or watching TV, or if anybody would be dreaming about having a special nightlight or anything in particular, but one of those would be to where that having a job to where you have a job to where you carry a book bag or a binder around that keeps a lot of things organized and neat, and as well as for how it's handled also, and working with other people. And these other people could be people that you don't quite know yet. So people that you don't know yet, and I guess it's like people that you don't know yet that could take interest in what you do especially, and then they give you orders like hey, that I need you on a job. Like, well, that was not on the job resume, like that was not even in the job description. So if anybody warns us to her that is that what you call whenever people start throwing the work at you? Whenever people start throwing the work at you, what do you call that? They start just telling you what you gotta do. So that's just a thing is to where that anything about what keeps us busy also. But you have right here, so I talk about for work on its own, for jobs. And that my first job, I know I probably mentioned it before, is that I did not think that was going to be anything too much related to a lot of paperwork and maybe online stuff as well. Maybe working with the binder, that I actually thought that maybe one of my first jobs was going to be something like maybe taking the trash out or washing a car, or maybe if anything snow plow, it's like a plowing the street, especially if it's going to be a snow day, like a shoveling snow, if it's going to be shoveling snow. But really that if anybody warns us toward it, that any jobs that you did have back whenever you were very young, and chores around the house especially, that too many of them have anything to do with all this electronic stuff and anything. He says, I know if I can tell anybody, I can say anybody to hear that anybody listening that the jobs that I do around here. But then some that may say is that if anything that those jobs pay about maybe $1.50, maybe every 3 months, something like that. Every 3 months that they pay about maybe $1.50, something like that on salary. So if anybody were wondering to her, that when do you think is a good time really to say that, okay, we're raising the prices, the price, it's like if you're like warrantor, that any jobs that you do get, and are people really going to be paying attention about how well that you're able to handle them, or if they're going to be paying attention to where it's like no vacation pay, no paid training or anything like that, really about who really wants to take the job anyway. But you have right here is an example right here of like for $100 right here. So most of us, like with me though, like always wonder what a $100 bill look like, and especially on a credit card, and managing a credit card especially, and any other type of expenses, and knowing about anything about basic math especially, anything about higher education especially, and like warrantor, that really that time seems to fly much faster whenever you stay busy with something. And if we would go by to where that you get a job and then you're like warrantor, that it seems like to where that I started not too long ago, and thinking this to where that that if you're walking into your the office, or what you call getting the binder out, or maybe you working if you're getting started, you're working at a desk, and the thinking is to where that working at the desk, and then that you're working on something, and then and then you stay busy with something, and then that it's 8 hours later, and it's like 8 hours just goes by fast. And think about it to where that answer a phone call, or if it's maybe responding to an email or anything like that. And so a lot of these things that we may think about that have nothing to do with the binder, but I'm just using a binder right here as an example, as to where if it's something to do with like you're doing a number of things in just one spot right here. So nowadays with our smartphones and our tablets and our laptops, that you're doing a number of things in just one spot right here. And sometimes at jobs that you're like warrantor, especially if it's going to be maybe on a conference call, that for how well a job is handled, and as well as interviewing, talking to other clients about, especially the businesses, about what you do especially, and think about keeping everything organized. And I use these locks right here, by the way, just to mark as to where if like a locker combination. So anything that's kept into a binder especially, and you're like warrantor, something that makes it difficult for the hackers or so, to prevent them from from getting into the information, the files of information especially. It's like access keys or so, that they say that it should only be for those who are using it the most, and for security purposes also. So this right here would be an example right here of like a login key, and as well as like for it's like for sign in information as well. This one right here was an example right here of a desk. So if I were to be sitting at the desk right here, and I can tell anybody here that back whenever I was young, that I wanted my own desk, in my own bedroom, but still that people ask me, it's like, why do you even want your own desk? And if what would you even have on it if you had your own desk? Like, well, what would I have on it? I would maybe have a lamp on there, and I would maybe have like a little notebook on there, maybe the TV to the maybe the remote control to the television set, or maybe a radio, somewhere where I can maybe read a book or something like that. But if anybody were a warrantor, you may be dreaming about having something like that in your bedroom, and like warrantor, that they're really about how many times like warrantor, any businesses, they may warrantor, you're staying busy with the job, right? Like, but you're not, nobody really gave you permission to do that job at home. I'm like, well, the job's getting done, ain't it? But still, that any type of arrangements that we can maybe think about is to where anything about what's called job skills. And sometimes it's like whenever you're home, and you're like, say you call it homework, but let's just say that with this job, I know I called it, one a job carry, and the other one was we call the portable help desk. But this was right here was what you call like a binder. For my senior year, I had this binder right here that contained a number of pages, some of those pages of notebook, of paper that was not used, and pencils, and a ruler. And so knowing about any source of information that's collected especially. And if you're like warrantor, that if you're going to be helping somebody else, assist them with what they have questions about especially. So for any job, and if you buy a warrantor, anything that pays the big bucks especially, talk about for cash ID, as well as for busy tutoring, as well as for training. So any jobs that more likely that we're going to have, and you're like warrantor, the types of jobs is to where that whenever you're start working a job from your first 3 weeks of a job, or maybe your first 30 days on a job, that you're like Warren, where you go through a lot of training. And how will we know is toward if we don't need that, too much of that training, and you pretty much get the idea. It seems like the answer really is toward whenever it starts working on its own. Whenever you just start doing things automatically, when a lot of that stuff is corrected, and like whenever they start testing you, especially on the job, especially is to where that anything that needs to be done on the job too, that anything that you're working on, and like Warren, to where that people test you, especially about your work performance, especially. But anyway, but talk about for busy, and I know sometimes that we may think about what does busy usually mean, and anything about busy, that what does busy mean to anybody. And I would probably say is that busy basically means that that you're going to be working on something, and then you don't really need to be bothered by anybody else other than that's like for what you're doing, and that's like that for what you're doing could take a couple of hours. So if anybody warns us to her that for busy, and as well as for training, or if it's going to be tutoring, so you're like warning to her, the amount of time that you have, right now is kind of what you call, they say, is like it's booked. It's booked up to where that you don't need any distractions, especially if you're going to be in a meeting, or if it's going to be any time, any job interview or anything like that. So, and I use this meeting by recorded, by the way, is to where that anything that's going on with what you're doing on a job, and then for anything else that's important compared to 6 months from now to maybe a year from now, that you're going to start seeing a lot of that data, what you call recorded, and anything that's missing maybe from the data that you have to report, for anything else that needs to be updated as well on the profile, especially any important task, especially. But there you have it. Talk about if anybody warns us to her that people ask you questions about something about the job, and then they kind of give you that look. It's like to where that what you call that that they people ask you, and then they're kind of waiting for you to respond, and you're like warning to her, the purpose about the on and then the mobile app, and any other questions that you have, and I'm sure I've answered those already, but still that people warn to her. They start talking to you, and so that's just the thing about me is to her that people may start talking to me mainly only is to her that maybe people find something real important about what I do on a job, or anything about the research, anything about my research or so. And so sometimes it's like people may say is to her, it's not a job. It was not a job then, but then now it is. And then on your hand, it could also be as to where you thought that it was made up, but then until you discovered it, to where it's find out that really, I'm like, would people really be hiring anybody for doing any kind of work like that? Really, that the chances are is knowing about. For any designer like me, and for anything for what I do and for what they understand, also the type of language for what it speaks also. And I was also thinking about for Cash ID, is if anybody will warrant to, or do we see any source of language to what the money speaks, especially to where if it's going to be what you call for any security purposes, if it's going to be what you call any 3D effects or anything like that. But they are talking about, say, for a desk. If this was right here, this binder was an example right here of a desk right here. You have right here is the three different sides of the binder. Well, right here with the locks. I can remember my first year of middle school. I can remember that I was kind of concerned about that, by learning the kind of locker combination, as well as right here was me right here. So for busy tutoring training, and this right here represents for a security pin. And if anybody were warranted, security pin. That's basically it's for security. It's confidential information, and you may be using that if you're going to be doing anything online, especially managing and budgeting the income, and anything with online accounts or so like that. And you're warranted toward it. Not to, if some of them were only be about maybe 3 digits long, and you're warranted toward it. How safe is that? And then they're going to maybe have it to where you can maybe keep it somewhere secure, and as well as for how you handle the job, especially for how you handle that task is to where keep an eye on the logins as well whenever you sign in and sign out of a website. So you're like warned toward it that a lot of the stuff that I did not get trained on back whenever I was in the fifth grade. Back whenever I was in the fifth grade, a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that I really had to keep memorized were what you call inside of a folder. So there's a lot of this electronic stuff. And so if anybody were worried to where, do you think that people would be paying you to keep a lot of stuff organized as well as explain to them about what they see here? And it seems like to where that, yep, that was pretty much my first job. That was my first job. People, they email like when I wanted to, or whenever you turn something in, or whenever you mail something, or trying to pay something, or anything like that, trying to do something, they're going to ask you about anything unusual that they may see, about maybe mail or anything like that, and they ask you about it. And it's like, well, that was actually an activity that I thought you would maybe like to see, or that was just something to where that maybe that you decide to share with you. And so that's just the thing, though, is toward it. That really, that whenever people ask questions, does that mean is to where necessarily to where you're breaking the rules, like you're breaking the rules, or does that mean is to where they are extremely curious and knowing about what's that all about? Hey, there's a job offer available. We've seen something like that, but then we're just wondering to where that what type of degree did you have and study for higher education, as well as for how well that you're performing the work, it's like for the job interview especially. Prepare for the job interview and the information that they collect especially. So if anybody that may want to tour, really, what is the difference? But anyway, for anything on order as well as for reference, it's like for what's recorded. So if anybody will want to tour that, your first 6 months or so on the job, maybe your first 3 or your first year on the job that you're like warranted or that you may see something more than just what you call maybe more income, but then on your hand that you're going to start, it's like it depends on how well the job goes. As you may start seeing more people that take interest in what you do, and to where it's like to where that at one time the job was just what you call just temporarily, but until it became as to where that you got a number of clients, a number of people who have bonded with your work. And think about it, to where like with bond, though, what does bond basically mean is to where if you're going to be wearing any type of, maybe if it's going to be any type of socks or shoes or maybe type of pajama wear, it basically means is to where that they're going to continue what you call want you to do more projects, more work for them. Until it's like that they say is to where that and about is to where that until they're able to learn on their own, or if they say it's until you basically become a family member of the company. So if you want to use that like a definition too, is to where you stay busy enough to where that you become a family member to the company, to where that they you've been when they know you work very well, and you've been with them long enough to where it's like that it seems like to where that they're not going to let you go. They know you work very well, and they're going to continue wanting you to do work for them. But that seems like a lot of times like a job to where I'm sure most of us would probably like to have also. A job to where that whenever you first get started, is to where that there was no promotions offered yet. A lot of things were just what you call that were just not provided yet in the system or so. But we are talking about the future here, about jobs, though. So, job applications, that if anybody were warranted toward it, that it may not happen by tomorrow, but then they may say it's like, yep, while you were sleeping, that this is what's been going on with your profile. That you got people interested in what you do, you got people reviewing your profile, and you got people that want to even ask you questions. And it's like, well, any of these questions, I can't guarantee I'm going to have the answer for them, but I'll go ahead and try and answer the best I can. So if anybody will warrant to her, really, anything that keeps us busy, really. So you're like warrant to her that any ideas? I got plenty of ideas, really, but really that they are not going to take only a half an hour. They're going to maybe take 30 days or so, about the project, though, like the project for what needs to be done also. But still, that there are some jobs I'm sure that they say they only take up to 5 minutes to do them, just to complete the task. It's like there are some jobs out there that may only take 5 minutes to do those, and they may pay a fair salary also. But anyway, but if anybody will warrant or any questions that more likely that remain about what is the difference and knowing about really that whenever you find a job for what you do, it's like you were a student, and then by the time that you actually get the job, or that people find something very interested about your research, and people start asking you questions, and they're kind of wondering to where they ask you a question, and then they're waiting for your response, and you're like warrantor that any conversations that go on, especially when people are kind of curious, they're going to be extremely curious about for what you got to say about that, and they're like, say, well, what? Well, what do you got to say? Well, thanks for taking interest in my work, and as well as that I thought this was made up at one time, but then it's like knowing about it until I found out more information about this or that, and then I decided to share it with a few of the other groups. And so that's just basically about as to where that I'm only a part-time, I'm only on this part-time, don't you? Like, yeah, so well, the binder only says yeah, but then the binder, that was just what you call something to start out with, right? But until you get a group of other members or so, other members of the team, then maybe that they're going to say is to her that the job's part-time or full-time, that anything that you stay busy with, right? Anything that I stay busy with. I keep thinking though is that anything that I stay busy with may not have anything to do with the job, but it was just maybe for practice or just an activity. But really, how many activities that really could explain about what I do, huh? But on your hand too, talk about the tools, and as well as the settings, as well as anything that was converted from paper, from analog to digital as well. But other than that, anything that keeps us busy as well, knowing about for how the mobile service goes, and as well as the online service goes. Thanks for watching. Manny Mick 25, Matthew 31. Have a great day.